The foul weather of November 20th, 1917, had perfectly concealed the 476 British tanks as they approached the German fortifications near the French town of Cambrai. 19 infantry divisions accompanied the tanks and readied themselves for a surprise attack. Third Army General Sir Julian Byng was confident his new combined artillery, infantry, and tank tactics would put the Germans on the run. Almost 500 tanks pointing downhill with thousands of men behind would surely inspire fear in the heart of the enemy. At 6:30 a.m., the stillness of the morning was suddenly disturbed by a creeping barrage of over 1,000 British guns. The symphony of metal, powder, and earth had begun. Germany had considered the barbed wire protecting their lines to be invincible, but the British had other ideas in mind. It would be, quote, through the mud and the blood to the green fields beyond. The tank formations roared and rolled downhill in a brand new strategy that was about to change war forever. Tanks were used for the first time during the Battle of Flers-Courcelette, lasting from September 15th to 22nd, 1916. The engagements were part of the broader Battle of the Somme, which consumed resources and men like never before in warfare. Although the colossal and imposing British Mark I tanks left an initial impression of terror in the German forces as they rolled into the battlefield and decimated their trenches, they were far from perfect. Soon, the effect passed, and the Prussians figured out the tanks were not invincible after all. On the contrary, they stood out as an easy target for artillery emplacements and mortars due to their low speed, size, and constant engine problems. The first tank deployments faced numerous technical difficulties. Still, they improved rapidly with each new campaign deployment, leading to quick advances in armored warfare. Like aircraft, tanks impacted the battlefield and became a pillar of combat on the Western Front. The British Tank Corps kept studying how tanks could be properly exploited to break the stalemate of trench warfare. In mid-1917, Colonel John F.C. Fuller, Chief of Staff of the Tank Corps, concluded that using tanks and other armored vehicles in Flanders was futile. The region was swampy and humid. The ground was too soft for tanks, significantly limiting their operational capabilities. Like cavalry, tanks required adequate terrain to maneuver effectively and support the infantry as intended, without getting bogged down in artillery craters full of mud. Instead, Colonel Fuller and the Tank Corps commenced planning an operation near Ypres-Passchendaele, where the region was dry and the ground was better suited for tank operations. The British and French had envisioned tanks as a breakthrough weapon, but had failed to make any noticeable advance on the Western Front. The Tank Corps was set to change that with a new offensive. Although Colonel Fuller and his staff had initially envisioned the attack near Saint-Quentin, the location was changed to Cambrai to avoid cooperation with the French military and ensure maximum secrecy. Nevertheless, the British Commander-in-Chief, Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig, rejected Colonel Fuller's massive tank offensive, as most British forces were focused on the Passchendaele offensive. At this point in the war, British tank tactics were still evolving, and tankers were experimenting with different strategies. They were used in concentrated formations to break through enemy lines, overcome trenches, barbed wire, and other fortifications, and perform flanking maneuvers. The armored vehicles were also employed for reconnaissance and supporting infantry units when storming enemy machine gun positions and artillery emplacements. As the weeks went by, the plan proposed by Fuller and his superior, Brigadier General Sir Hugh Elles, attracted the attention of the commander of the British Third Army, General Sir Julian Byng. He accepted the massive tank attack on Cambrai in August 1917, but some changes had to be made. The proposed 12-hour raid was changed to hold any ground taken during the initial push. After much planning and discussion, Sir Douglas Haig finally approved the push toward Cambrai in early November 1917. The Cambrai plan called for a massive swarm of tanks that would swipe German defensive lines without any preparatory bombardments to retain the element of surprise during the initial stage of the attack. General Byng transformed the small-scale attack into an offensive that would attack the Hindenburg Line in a front that was around 13 kilometers long. Over 476 tanks were assembled for the offensive, including the cavalry and 19 infantry divisions. The vehicles and men only made movements at night to avoid German reconnaissance aircraft alerting the Prussians of the imminent attack. Foul weather limited air operations, favoring the British effort to conceal their troops. For the initial attack, the tanks and 8 infantry divisions would face 3 German divisions, comprising the 54th Reserve and the 20th Landwehr divisions. The British rated the latter as fourth-rate, but they still had reservations. 0 hour was set to start at 6:40 a.m. on November 20th. Over 1,000 artillery pieces were ready to test a new tactic orchestrated by General H.H. Tudor of the 9th Scottish Division. Instead of the usual preliminary bombardment that alerted the enemy of attacks, Tudor advocated for the use of sound ranging to swiftly silence enemy artillery at the first barrages. When the synchronized clocks hit 6:30 a.m., the 1,000 British guns instantly opened fire. The Germans barely knew what was coming. The surprise bombardment against German gun emplacements was followed by a creeping barrage 300 meters ahead of the British ground advance. The almost 500 tank engines roared, and vehicles charged swiftly under cover of smoke and artillery. The infantry advanced behind the tank formation, using it as cover from enemy machine guns and sharpshooters. Success was immediate. The 3rd Corps, under Lieutenant General William Pulteney, advanced more than 6 kilometers, reaching the Tow Wood and capturing a bridge near the Saint-Quentin Canal. However, the bridge collapsed after some tanks attempted to cross it, halting the advance into German territory. On the left, the 4th Corps, under Lieutenant General Charles Wolcombe, also breached Prussian lines and seized the woods of Bourlon Ridge. The British soldiers and tanks dug in to strengthen their hold on the newly captured territory. At the center of the offensive, the 51st Highland Division, under Major General George Harper, faced some setbacks, but still made considerable gains at Flesquières, a German strongpoint. The infantry under his command was falling behind, leaving the tanks unsupported and at the mercy of enemy artillery that quickly knocked them out. From this encounter, a mythical figure emerged. An unknown German officer, later dubbed the Lone Gunner of Flesquières, faced the armored vehicles alone and destroyed 16 of Major Harper's tanks in a remarkable turn of events. Despite the audacity of the defenders, British numerical superiority forced the Germans to leave the village on the night of November 20th. At the same time, General Byng dispatched his cavalry units to go after the withdrawing forces. The riders surrounded some fleeing units but turned back after stumbling with barbed wire defenses. The Prussians stabilized their lines, called reinforcements, and prepared a counterattack. It was now their turn to go on the offensive. While the British celebrated, German reserves reached the area to limit the advance. Soon, the advance reached a stalemate, characteristic of previous battles. The Britons made minimal gains and opted to reinforce their positions. The tanks gave way to the infantry to hold the ground captured. Meanwhile, most of the German efforts focused on Bourlon Ridge. Mouvres and Fontaine fell to the Germans on November 22nd, isolating British troops around Bourlon. An attack led by the 40th Division, comprised of over 100 tanks and 400 guns, was fruitless against 2 entrenched German divisions. Additionally, 20 Prussian divisions rallied at Cambrai for a massive counteroffensive to retake the Bourlon salient and drive the British out of the region. The divisions were split between Group Arras, Caudry, and Bussigny. For the assaults, the Germans wanted to test breakthrough tactics envisioned by General Oscar-Emile von Hutier. Some comprised massive shelling in a specific area, followed by overwhelming infantry assaults. The Germans launched their attack at 7 a.m. on November 30th. Small groups of soldiers pierced British lines and attacked their counterparts from multiple locations, securing large pockets of territory. On December 3rd, with mounting losses and no recourse, the 3rd Corps and the rest of the British forces were finally ordered to retreat from the salient, keeping only Agincourt, Ribecourt, and Flesquières. More than 80,000 troops from both sides were wounded, missing, or deceased. Most of the territory the British captured during the first large-scale tank offensive of the conflict was reconquered by the Germans during their counterattack. The Battle of Cambrai also proved a valuable experience for the Germans, because their counterattack became the testing ground for future stormtrooping tactics, employed during the last offensives of 1918. Despite effectively using tanks, the British realized reserves were still essential for holding the captured territory. Overall, despite the lessons learned in armored vehicle design and tactics, Cambrai had not changed the overall strategic situation of the Western Front. At this point, the European powers had all but exhausted their armies and resources, and Germany was amassing seasoned troops arriving in the West by the thousands, following the Russian withdrawal. This renewed force would cause the war to extend one more year.